Hi guys, what's going on, and welcome back to what's just going to be a very short episode of Conquerors Blade today, because I'm really worn out and I can't be asked to do a long one. And I just wanted to touch very briefly on these patch notes, because there's a couple of interesting things that aren't really made very clear, or more specifically there's one really interesting thing, which even I didn't get it until I saw someone explain it properly and read it, and actually now it really kind of makes sense. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's just go down. I noticed that they added this to the top. Obviously, where if you try and gather in the open world at the moment, it tells you it costs silver. It's not. It costs bronze. They've just seemingly swapped the icon from silver to bronze. It's just an error. I think they'll fix it probably in the next hotfix. So there are a couple of small things. They've slightly increased filtering in the auction house. That's nice. It's a pretty horrible system to use. It's still a pretty horrible system. It's just now marginally less horrible. Things like mastery points transfer, not tremendously useful. At least they apparently are going to give you the option to obtain them from in-game activities. I've not yet done enough to notice where that's going to come from, but at least that potential option is still there. Now, some of the first main ones are the nerfs to the longsword. That's probably what most people are going to be most happy about with this patch. If you've watched my videos for any decent amount of time, you know, I've played fairly heavily with the longsword over the past couple of weeks, and this was needed. It was overpowered. I felt its main overpowered was its Clash of Shields, its charge, which actually isn't directly nerfed here, but we'll come to back to that in a minute. Other things that get nerfed are its Mercy of Heaven, which gets its cooldown increased, but it also gets its healing reduced, which is kind of a fairly significant one, because it means it's the amount of health it's returning both to the player and in the AoE effect to surrounding other heroes and your units is reduced. So that being one of its main sort of play points of the longsword is kind of being cut down a little bit. So yeah, I think this is probably a good thing. It's just like a general nerf across the class. Cooldown increases, healing reduction, and damage sort of reduction. So yeah, pretty hefty nerf to the longsword. I think we're going to be seeing a lot less of them now in games as people kind of get used to that. I don't think it makes it a completely crap class though. I just think it's not the current meta anymore like it used to be. We've got a little bit to the short sword and some other little minor changes. Another little minor change I did notice, which is kind of nice, is the durability changes. They've basically reduced the consumption rate for all items from light, medium, and heavy armor. So your equipment shouldn't wear out as quickly as it did before. That's nice. I've long complained about the durability, as have a lot of people. So I think the fact they've at least reduced the rate of it is a nicer thing. So using things like guardsman armor in field and siege battles is probably going to be more usable now because it's not going to degrade quite so fast. Although I've not actually tested this personally to see what the current rate looks like. So something I'll actually have to get into some siege battles to sort of try out. Got a handful of unit stuff, mostly armor reductions on some of the units that are fairly high on the armor. The Iron Reapers, like obviously that final very, very, very heavy infantry unit, that's obviously been nerfed down a little bit. We've got a little bit of some resource and crafting stuff. Really nothing that very major in that regard. This one is an interesting one down here, though, in terms of equipment crafting. They've basically lowered the thief requirements. So if you've ever gone and tried to craft some equipment, maybe just in like one of the capital cities or something, if you look at the higher tier equipment, you'll notice that it's all not available because the thief isn't a high enough level for you to craft a lot of that stuff. And that's what they've basically been reducing. You're still going to need to go to some higher tier thieves to get a lot of the things. A lot of the sort of siege stuff has been, from 4 to 9 to 5, 7 to 11 to 7. These are kind of good things that they've kind of knocked this down a little bit. Although it does kind of degrade the purpose somewhat of levelling up thieves in the open world as a clan. Because one of the main things that people were focusing on doing was doing all the thief quests to get towns up so you could craft this high tier equipment. Well, a lot of it is now, bar some of the sort of more extreme stuff, a lot of it is just going to be accessible from normal towns because they're now going to be of a suitable level. So I see why they've done it, but it does have the flip side of kind of reducing one of the end goals for houses in the game, in my opinion. Another sort of handful of irrelevant stuff. They increased movement speed in the open world. That's nice. Nothing around here that really struck me as being anything particularly significant. As I say, the movement speed stuff in the open world is nice. You can feel pretty painfully slow particularly when you're carrying siege equipment with you. You move so ridiculously slowly. It's frustrating. But at least they're kind of fixing that. Then we scroll down, and then there's a really hidden, important one. There's point number 3. Fix melee hero damage decay when they hit multiple units. When I first read that, it didn't click as being anything even remotely important. But supposedly what this means is, when you land a first hit on an enemy NPC, you'll do full damage, 100% damage. Then if that strike carries through, say if you're using a glaive or something which has a big AoE, it carries through, hits the second unit, it'll do 99% damage. Then it'll hit the third unit, it'll do 97%. Then it'll do 93, then 90, then 80, then 70, then 60. So it degrades massively. So if you go into, so traditionally something like a glaive could jump into a unit in the middle of archers and either do the swing on the horse or hop off and do an arc of steel and hit sort of 7 or 8 or 9 units at once and be able to do really good amounts of damage. Now that's not going to be the case anymore. You're still going to be able to get off and do those abilities, and the first sort of 2 or 3 units that you hit will probably go down really fast. But then as you continue your spin round, the amount of damage it does is going to end up being reduced. And that's kind of important because that's going to massively affect the ability of single heroes to output large amounts of AoE damage like they have been. So it's a de facto nerf to a lot of classes. And that's why I came back when at the start I said Class of Shields, which is the longsword's shield charge. We raise the shield and just charges in a super fast circle and knocks everyone down, is going to become less effective because for the first few people he knocks down, yes, he'll do a really good amount of damage, but then it's going to degrade very quickly because that's the damage decay element when they hit multiple units. So that's going to change quite a lot. It's also going to affect things like Nodachis, which use lifesteal. A big part of that is being able to do a lot of damage to a lot of units very quickly, can suck a lot of health in. That's no longer going to quite work like that because, yes, you might be able to get a good amount of damage on the first couple of hits, but as your damage drops off, so is your lifesteal because you're no longer going to be sucking quite so much health. So there's also small little unconsidered side effects to that. I think it's going to be an effective nerf to AoE units, so glaives, Nodachi, spear to some extent, poleaxe. It is going to be more of a buff to high damaging, more focused units, so things like muskets and bows, and something like dual blades, which is all about putting damage in quite a focused manner, because that's going to stay the same. It's not going to affect them really at all. Muskets shooting 1 unit at a time, that's still going to do its full damage whereas everyone else is getting a damage reduction, if that kind of makes sense. So yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting one. I'm going to have to certainly do a little bit of testing on this to kind of see how this plays out. But from my understanding of it so far, that's quite a significant change and definitely something that should have been highlighted more in the patch notes. And can I say, something I didn't even notice until I saw someone else comment on it. And then now it actually kind of makes sense. So yeah, that was kind of just my very, very brief summary of the patch notes. I didn't get them ahead of time this time, so I didn't really get much of a chance to go through them quite so thoroughly. But yeah, some changes, nothing massive bar that damage change and the longsword nerf. Two main changes. So there are some major changes. But nothing, it's not like it's not like the Knights and Squires update where they're introducing lots and lots of stuff. It's more of a sort of a mini patch. But anyway, hopefully this is kind of vaguely useful as a sort of very brief summary. Apologies for it being a couple of days late, and apologies for it just being a one take on this. I normally try and do it a bit more edited, but it's been a long day, so I can't be bothered. So yeah, any questions about the patch notes, do let me know in the comments down below. I'll try and get back to you and answer anything that I can. And yeah, subscribe to the channel for lots more Conquerors Blade content, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.